Well, my friend and I wrote a storyline for Netflix. We submitted it to Reese Witherspoon's company and got the nicest letter of rejection that said that that's not how you submit it and you have to go through proper channels. We don't want to spend any more money. This is a one-shot pony. So I thought I'd put social media to use and just read you one uh, chapter one, which is very, very brief because it's just an outline, give you an idea what it's like. And if one person says they like it, I'll read the next chapter. So the log line for the show is after landing her dream job as a White House speechwriter, 26-year-old Helen must overcome her trust issues to navigate the complexities of life in D.C. against the backdrop of family secrets and murders. She turns to longtime White House reporter Gabby as mentor and confidant as the stakes keep getting raised by more murders or potential vice president's running mates. Synopsis. It's hot and humid in Washington, D.C., and when a diverse group of multi-generational politicians, press, and security gather at the White House to celebrate Madam President's announcement of her VP running mate, the festivities are horribly uninterrupted when a VP candidate shakily enters the room and collapses to the floor, covering the pristine marble in a pool of blood. Chaos ensues. Ours is a multifaceted story of mystery, politics rife with divergent motives and manipulations, complicated secret family dynamics, and a convoluted path of personal growth. Think House of Cards meets This Is Us. The story follows the mishap and relationships of Helen, a young Pulitzer Prize winner writer who has joined the White House staff. Ben, a diligent D.C. police detective. Gabby, a seasoned White House reporter. George, everyone's favorite doorman, and multiple nefarious politicians, the primary one being, quote, the senator from the South, end quote. The main characters have unknowingly crossed paths in the past, and the dynamics of their interaction are the baseline for our story. Episode 1 is called There's a Death in the White House. Takes place Washington, D.C. at 11:30 p.m. Helen, a White House speechwriter, is in her tiny D.C. apartment working on an acceptance speech for the president's anticipated second term. The next morning, immediately preceding the president's announcement, the VP candidate drops dead. Helen was aghast because she had just been in bed with him that morning. So that's the introduction to the first episode. We actually wrote 11. There's actually 13 episodes. Shonda Rhimes did a TED Talk, and this was written exactly according to her instructions, and then I added one little piece that I think was missing. So it's also been tested from the first 25 pages. So we know people like it. It's just that we don't know how to get it published. So hopefully someone will see this. We have copyrighted it 6 Ways to Sunday. So if anybody wants to go and steal it and make $1 million movie out of it, great. We'd love to take the proceeds that way. But beyond that, if I read this and one person likes it and gives it a like, I will read episode number 2. So episode 1, There's a Death in the White House. It's a muggy Washington, D.C. night in a studio apartment not far from the White House. Pulitzer Prize winner Helen Smith, now a 26-year-old speechwriter for the White House, has just finished putting the final touches on the acceptance speech to be delivered by the president, who is now running for a second term. Her candidate's policies remain nebulous, and Helen had needed to be exclusive when discussing her candidate's plans for the ensuing presidential term. Even to Helen, this exercise had been a challenge, but that was politics. The polarization of the country had made it difficult for all the candidates to venture any sort of real opinion out of fear of offending potential voters. Therefore, contrary to her proficiencies in typical style, Helen opted to take a cheerleader slant in order to rally everyone around a generic slogan of, "We can do better." Thus, no one had been able to define exactly how that was to be achieved. As Helen lowered the top of her laptop, which she affectionately called Hubby, she bent down and scooped up her sleepy bulldog. Darkness gently covered the studio apartment as Helen turned off the banker's lamp that she had been using to light her workspace. As Helen turned into the direction of her bed, she was startled by the sound of snoring. Absorbed in her work, Helen had forgotten she had male company. The next morning, Helen entered the White House to find everyone flummoxed. The senior aides were behind closed doors with the president, and speculation was that the president was going to call a spontaneous press conference to pontificate to the press, but on what topic, no one knew. Helen found the most disconcerting, as she knew this frequently meant she would have to prepare a post-conference clarification statement because the original remarks were generally not clear or worse, contradictory. The doors finally opened and Helen, along with the rest of the anxious staff, was hit with a tsunami of political energy. The president, located in the eye of the storm, was impeccably dressed and portraying the picture of calm. She was wearing an off-white suit in honor of the women's suffrage movement, and it complemented her rich, dark skin. Being the first president of color, Madam President was always careful to dress well, but not ostentatiously, and to be conscious of what clothing would appear well on camera. As the president approached the podium, Helen silently and amusingly, wondered if any of Madam President's male predecessors had to equally contemplate policies, practices, speech, verbiage, image, and wardrobe decisions. There were, of course, many past presidents who had surprisingly affinity for fashion and style. JFK, an icon of men's circles, is said to have set this style for an entire generation of men. Before him, Franklin D. Roosevelt was a suave dresser who would look sharp in leg braces. Warren G. Harding had Jonas Brothers good looks. William Howard Taft managed to conceal 340 pounds in surprisingly stylish suits. Teddy Roosevelt set the standard for the pre-Land's End era, but it was Bill Clinton with his perfectly symmetrical physique who was Helen's favorite. Alas, President Clinton's good looks and charm only served to actuate trouble, as was also the case with President Kennedy. Helen mused that if a woman president showed her wild oats, or for that matter, weighed 340 pounds, the world would not be as forgiving. It continues to be the case that women have to work harder and smarter in order to advance. Suddenly, Helen felt a sharp poke in her right ribs, scattering her thoughts in a million different directions and bringing her abruptly back into the present moment. It was her sidekick on the hill, Gabby Brickhouse, capitulating her back into reality with the pointed end of her ballpoint pen and discreetly nodding her head in the direction of the side door. Helen turned her head toward the door, and an involuntary gasp left her lips. Her heart skipped a beat. A sweat crossed her brow. Her hands began to tremble. Gabby was a pioneer reporter on the Hill and the first female member of the White House press corps. She covered the White House during numerous administrations, starting with Kennedy. Despite being several decades older than Helen, she was Helen's best friend. Gabby quietly encouraged Helen to steady herself. The president's new running mate entered the room, appearing inebriated. Gabby's eyes communicated a war-weary message to Helen. Remain calm. I've seen worse. The incumbent president had decided to retire, and the president tapped Senator Baldwin from Florida as her new running mate. The compendium on the senator showed no propensity for drink. It appears important facts had been omitted. Now Helen would need to do damage control. Why the Secret Service hadn't intercepted the senator before he entered was a question for another day. Noticing no one was taking corrective action, Helen moved steadily to the senator's side, where she realized he was not drunk, but suffering some sort of medical episode. Just as Helen reached for Senator Baldwin's arm to steady him, the senator dropped to the ground. It was as if William Refrigerator Perry, arguably the best football defensive tackle of all time, had sacked the senator. The entire room gasped in unison. Senator Baldwin stood a strapping 6'4", weighed 225 pounds in his birthday suit, and when his stiff body fell face forward on the pristine marble floor, a cacophony of indescribable, life-ending noises echoed throughout the building. Senator Baldwin was dead before he hit the floor. and instinctively everyone knew it. The Secret Service rushed Madam President out of the room. They then proceeded to clear the room. Not one to miss an opportunity, Gabby took out her notepad and started taking copious notes. The last time Helen had seen Senator Baldwin was just before sunrise that morning when the senator had snuck out of her studio apartment. He had been in good spirits. Weeks earlier, they had made the announcement that he was going to be POTUS's running mate. The announcement had been a huge success. His wife and grown children had agreed to go along with a, quote, happy family, end quote, public persona that had been created for them until the last vote was tallied. The general public loved him. Madam President's campaign manager, Jim Handover, thought Senator Baldwin's dashing good looks and charming disposition would give the president a significant bump in his polls. And they did. The future looked bright for candidate Baldwin, but not any longer. So, if anybody likes that out there, I just need one like, and I'll be happy to get back on and read episode 2, titled 14 Years Earlier, Helen's Childhood Neighborhood. So thanks for listening, and hopefully I get one like, and see you later.